everyone, and welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast. My guest today is Jamie Fiore Higgins, who is many things, but I have invited her here today, more specifically, to speak about her excellent book. It's a great story for anyone who hasn't read it. It's called Bully Market: My Story of Money and Misogyny at Goldman Sachs. Now, Jamie, you became one of the few women at the highest ranks of Goldman Sachs. You felt spurred on by the obligation you felt to your working class immigrant family, were, by the way, both Italian Americans from New Jersey, and we went to the same college, but we'll get to that when I talk a little bit about how we met. And you rose through the ranks and you saw it all. I mean, you really saw it all. And I don't want to spoil the book because it's a book that many, many people have read. A lot of people have spoken about. And, it's actually, I think, we're living at a time where, greed, power, money, all these things are ruling our worlds more than ever. And your book, I think, is just still, it's so incredible a read, in light of, I think, everything that is going on today. So I wanted to thank you for coming on the podcast today. I wanted to thank you also because when I was at a moment where I was sort of on the fence, I don't know what book to write, I don't know what to do, you took the time out to speak with me. And it was one of those encounters that I speak a lot about on the podcast because it really helped me.
Oh,
It helped me clarify. You said something to me that I'll never forget, Jamie. You said that you had been saying to people, I'm writing a book, I'm writing a book, I'm writing a book. And you kept saying it. And you said, I didn't want to be that person who says, I'm writing a book. So I wrote
uh, the book.
the book.
There's so many people. I mean, and I love that for people who want to write a book, and I think it's amazing. And of the people who say they want to write a book, a very small percentage actually do it because the idea of it is really sexy, right? But
Uh-huh.
to do it, it's a real grind.
Exactly. But it was like you said it to me and something clicked because I was like, yeah, I don't want to be that person
Yeah,
who's
you got to
working
do
on,
it.
you got to do it. So I'm very grateful to you for that. I'm grateful that another podcast brought us together because it was actually because I heard you on the Seven Sisters podcast
Mm,
that I reached out to you. You and I both are alumni of Bryn Mawr College. And so Anasakata.
that's a
And I'm just thrilled to have you here today to chat about your book and what you're doing today as
I
well.
love it. I'm so
So,
happy to be here.
yay, finally, we're doing this. So, I really want to dive right in and ask you about the moment you realized that you needed to write Bully Market.
So it was always kind of a joke. I had a really good friend at the time at Goldman, and he and I would often reflect at how messed up things were. And we're like, we have to write a book, we have to write a book. But it was just kind of a joke. And then I left Goldman on my own. I retired, resigned, and I'll never forget how depressed I was after. Like I was so depressed, I like couldn't get out of bed depressed. It was as if I was abruptly fired. And
Yeah.
I was really curious about like, wait, Jamie, you made this decision on your own. You actually planned for it, and yet you're so upset about it. And it really made me pick up on the theme of I really felt I was what I did and nothing more. So therefore, leaving my career, it's like, what am I now? So that was the beginning of it. And then right after I left, Me Too started really gaining traction. And I remember watching the Today Show one morning, and my husband was there, and one of the latest men was being described and all the things he had done. And I said to Dan, I'm like, this happened a lot at Coleman. Like, I realized how like almost anesthetized I was to it because I
Yeah.
was so it was just so commonplace to be your body parts to be talked about, your butt to be squeezed, all this stuff that we would just kind of push off as like, that's just the way it is. And then kind of seeing it through the lens of like a normal society with these clearer lenses, I was like, wait, what really happened was messed up. And I was like, I need to write about this just to kind of make sense of it because I was dealing with these competing truths. that like this was a really messed up environment that I needed to get out of. And I was so desperately sad that I walked away because it was how I identified. And yet it was an awful thing to identify as. So I really said, I want to write this just to make sense of it. Writing is not therapy, and it can be therapeutic. And it was really just I'm going to write this and it's probably going to sit in my basement in a box. I never really thought it was going to become anything more than my own personal accounting of what happened. But that's kind of what started me writing.
Which is an amazing story because, and I think it actually segues perfectly into my next question, but you kind of wrote it. I get it too, because, I understand when you lose that sense, when that's your identity, right? And you're all of a sudden, and even though you knew that it was so nefarious and it was doing so much damage, even though you were out of it, you still, it takes a long time
Yes.
to process it, for lack of a better word, right? But when you were in the thick of it and your whole identity was, power and financial success, I mean, but you saw those things, right? Or no?
I saw them, but I normalized them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and it's funny, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about Bryn Mawr, but
Yeah.
like we went to this women's college
Hmm.
that was like very pro women, feminist in the best possible way. We were kind of encouraged to just break down barriers, which is awesome. And I feel like Bryn Mawr didn't do the best job of saying, yeah, like we're in this cocoon of like lovely, like we could do anything. And yet you're going to have to go into the real world. And I felt like I didn't get any tools to kind of bridge that gap. So when I got
Mm.
to Goldman and I was the only woman in the room, and guys were building Excel spreadsheets on our boob size and our butt size. And when I would say something and they'd be like, Jamie, I don't know where you went to school, but like that feminist place like brainwashed you. Like that's not the real world. This is the real world. And then I kind of was like, wait, I mean, I was only 22. So I was like, maybe they're right. So yes, I noticed all those things. And, when you see bad behavior that's ignored and normalized, that's just the way it is. Guys are pigs. That's just the way it is. So, yes, I noticed it and I accepted it that this is what you have to tolerate in order to be successful in this industry. It
Yeah.
wasn't until I left
Hmm.
when I would like share stories with women like who had kids, my kids who were my kids' friends. And I would say, oh, yeah, when I nursed with my youngest, they used to moo at me. And she was like, they did what? And I was like, yeah, I know they're assholes. She's like, Jamie, that's not more than assholes. That's like, and that's when, and this is all while I was writing the book. So it's amazing how when you're indoctrinated into a culture, how you just accept behavior that's so counter to like your inner wise voice.
Yeah. And I mean, we're leaving. I think you point out something fundamental, which is that disconnect sometimes between what sort of college teaches you and then what you face when you get out into the real world, if you will, because it is kind of an ivory tower bubble type of situation. But let's not ignore, you were building a career, you had a family, you had a husband. I mean, you were under a lot of pressure also,
Yeah,
so it was, you kind of had to kind of be a part of this in order to then have the kind of success you had.
100%. And I was just talking to someone yesterday about this. Like, when you grow up with not a lot,
Yeah.
and in your first year, I made more than my parents ever had. And at that point, they were like a couple years older than I am now, had a whole career. It's like, and when your older brother says, Jamie, this is an opportunity to elevate our family. This is a level of success people like us don't get access to. You are setting the bar higher for the next generation. Oi, I get chills just thinking about it because
It
it's so
just got
much.
chill.
It's
Yeah.
so much to hold for a 22-year-old, but that's part of it too. And I was just talking to someone yesterday because, it's so easy to say, and I had so many friends who'd be like, Jamie, it sounds like a shitty place. Jamie, you're so miserable. Jamie, it seems like it's costing you so much. Walk away. And it'd be like, yeah, you see that money hit your bank account that feels like you just hit the lottery, coming from family who just recently came to this country, you try to walk away from that. You not only have to walk away from that, but all the dreams of your ancestors, all the sacrifices they made, they have to walk away from it too. So, yes, that kind of obligation fueled me to ignore that inner voice and say, this is just the way it is, just suck it up and deal with it.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something that comes out in the book. It comes out, obviously, it's coming out in our conversation. But, while you're in it, you're just like, I mean, this is what I need to do. People are counting on me to do this. And, there's a whole, we could talk about the immigrant experience, we could talk about all those other things, but those were so deeply entrenched in you, in your narrative. And then you were, again, just a young woman trying to be successful in a very cutthroat environment. You talked a few minutes ago about, writing is therapeutic, it's not therapy. I mean, I've read the book and I read it actually very quickly because it's an incredible story,
Oh,
but I
thank you.
can't imagine it was easy for you to write. And I'm curious to know what the hardest part or chapter was for you to write, to put yourself out there like that.
Oh, so I definitely think so when I wrote the book, it was very important for me that if I was going to shine a light on what happens, I was going to shine a light on every awful thing, including the awful things I did.
Yeah.
And in the years that I was writing, I was reading a lot of memoirs, a lot of similar type work-based memoirs. And I would often finish the book and be like, they didn't tell me everything. Like that author held back. And
Mhm.
listen, like Goldman Sachs was a really tough place to be. And there were a lot of people who did unfortunate things to me, and I was complicit. And so to me, that was the hardest part to write, to really be like, and it's so funny. I was talking to a colleague yesterday, and I was like, you would not have recognized me. And she's like, come on. I'm like, no. And I literally like talked about something I had done. And she's like, holy crap, Jamie. So, like, I think that was the hardest part, the kind of reckoning of, yes, I was a, I experienced the environment and I caused other negative experiences. And that was the worst part to write because that was the most counter to who I am.
Yeah. But I think ultimately that's what makes the book so good because I'm also huge. I read memoirs all the time as well. And I often get that same sense that people aren't telling it like it totally is. And it's something I really appreciated about your book because you said, yeah, this was a problem, but I was part of the problem.
Mhm.
And coming to terms with that, I think that probably the growth that comes with writing your story, the moment also in which you wrote the story, our historical moment, understanding, making sense of what was going on and understanding, okay, yeah, I was a part of this, but now I'm doing something to change it, to change the culture. I'm telling you what I did, I'm telling you what was going on. And I think that was very brave of you. And it makes it not only does it make it a better read, but it makes you a more credible narrator, if you will, and more endearing because we're human beings. We have weaknesses. Like,
Yeah.
that's the reality. We make mistakes.
Yeah. And I will also say, kind of putting my own dirty laundry to air, really, in order for me to give the grace to myself for what I did and for my family to give me grace for what I did, it's like I have to give grace to those who did inappropriate things to me. And so we were all part of, and kind of like, I'm now like almost through with a master's degree. And I've learned a lot in that coursework that a lot of these problems are just systemic. Like we were all part of this machine. And I think one of the interesting themes of the book is, when I first started at Goldman, they used to call me Sister Jamie because I would blush when they would say inappropriate things. I would challenge them back, and that's when they would be like, "Where did you go to school?" Like we're gonna call you Sister Jamie. So to me, I feel like the book is a really interesting experiment. Like take someone sweet and innocent, Sister Jamie, put her into this environment, and environments change us.
They do.
I think we like to think as humans, oh no, I know my North Star, I know who I am. Like I was Sister Jamie. I was a really sweet, kind person. Put her into this machine and see what happens. In order to survive, we do things. So I think that's interesting too, because when I think about a lot of the people I worked with, they were part of the same machine. Who knows what they were before they came?
Exactly. Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up because I think also just thinking about where we are right now in the world,
Yeah.
um, it's something good for us to keep in mind, that sometimes that people's stories, that people have a lot going on, that there is a lot maybe beyond what we see or what we think we know. I know that, I mean, the book is full of a lot of stories like the ones you've already just sort of mentioned, but is there anything that you originally didn't want to put in the book, but then you ultimately did?
Yeah, yeah. So no, it just because I just specifically remember this. So when you write a book, you write this book proposal, which is kind of a Cliff Notes version, or for the younger people, a Spark Notes version of the book. And then you go and you basically interview with different publishers. And so my agent was like, Jamie, it would be helpful if you also had other anecdotes to talk about that are not in the book proposal. So I went out to dinner with my husband the night before, and we're like, just kind of like remembering. And so we had this meeting, and I don't even know what publisher I'm with, but I talked about how I was like physically assaulted by one of my colleagues. And then we get off the phone and my agent's like, "You didn't put that in the book proposal?" And it was funny because I guess when I wrote the book, I don't know why I think I didn't put it in initially because it was very, I don't know, with different characters and I couldn't really get it in. And then she's like, no, that's got to be in the book. And I think, again, it just kind of illustrates, even all those years later, how I still kind of had blinders on, that wasn't even like important to put in. So then I did put it in. But yeah, I mean, that I was just like, she was like, I can't, and I was like, oh, well, and I was like, there are a lot of stories, and I'm even thinking of stories now that I never put in. That because it's like there were just a lot of them.
Yeah. I can imagine while you were writing the book, I mean, this is a great episode of it. Maybe also in some ways it was very, I mean, I can imagine it was not easy to revisit a lot of these things, and when the memories, come back to you, what kind of emotional toll did that take on you, reliving a lot of those experiences and sharing them with your readers?
Um, it all happened before the book was published. Once the book was published, I mean, I still have Goldman dreams here and there, but not terrible. While I was writing them, I'd have a lot of like dreams, like I don't want to say nightmares. So it's not like I like woke up like in a cold sweat, but just like, reliving kind of like the less, you know, the more challenging times. And again, I said in the beginning, I wrote this not thinking it was going to go anywhere. And then
Right.
literally just right place, right time, the universe working out, luck, whatever you want to call it. I finished it in January and I was like, okay, I'm done. And then I'm like, what should I do with it? I was like, okay, let me try. I'll like send it out to a few people. And so I started like looking into it in February, and then by April I had an editor. No, by March I had an editor. By May I had an agent, and by July I had the book deal. So it went really fast, and that's when it was like, holy crap, this is going out into the world. And that's when, because it's kind of fun to write it and have it on your Word doc on your computer and not thinking it was going to go anywhere. And I had had some friends read it. So, like, it's not like I was totally, you know, and then I was like, oh my God, like these people I wrote about, anonymized, of course, I'm like, they're going to be reading it. And so there was a lot of stress, a lot of panic attacks that year. And then I will say, once I wrote the book, I felt pretty good, except people have said they can read the book quickly. So the book came out like right before Labor Day. So 2 days later, a friend of mine called me who's still in the business. And she was like, everyone's reading it at Goldman and they know who these characters are.
No.
And my body went cold and I immediately called the attorney, and she's because I anonymized, I like did everything I could. And if you sat next to me at work, you're going to know who the players are. And I remember calling my attorney and she's like, Jamie, when we anonymize characters, it's so someone in the middle of the country who doesn't know you doesn't know who you're talking about. But of course, if people worked with you, they're going to have a good sense of who you're talking about. But I had that like wave of panic, that I don't know, that was I going to get sued, whatever. And then she's like, no, like that's expected. And so that was kind of like the last panicky moment I had. And then I kind of made peace with it.
So what were some of the reactions from readers? And I'm particularly interested in ones that maybe touched you the most. People who either reached out to you, people you knew didn't know.
Yeah. I had a lot of emails from my clients. I always kind of talked a little bit about Goldman, how we were like this dysfunctional family on the street, but we had the beautiful white picket fence and the beautiful manicure lawn, so nobody knew what was going on inside. I kind of like feel like my clients were my neighbors, if you will. So they knew me, they knew where I lived, but they didn't know what was going on inside. And so I heard from a lot of clients to say, Jamie, I always kind of suspected things were rough there, like, thank you for sharing, whatever. So that really meant a lot because I never would say anything against Goldman. Oh, no, no, no. You don't do that while you're there. Um, so that meant a lot. I've heard from, even just like yesterday, I heard from a woman who was like, thank you so much for writing this book. It makes me feel less alone. So those always make me feel good. Um, I heard from some women who I was not supportive of at the time, who were like, thanks for writing the book. And, you know, you were not helpful to me when I needed it. And I was like, yeah, I own that and I'm sorry. And all I can say is like, I was part of this system. And, you know, part of me writing this book is to kind of like, in a small way, make amends for that. So that was kind of hard to read. Um, I heard from a lot of I heard from a lot of guys from work. The ones I heard from were not the kind of bad actors, but it was very funny. Like my book came out in August. In June, Bloomberg had written a story about it, that it was coming. And I can't tell you how many guys from work were like, hey, Jamie, just checking in. Haven't heard from you for a while. I'm like, you want to know if you're in the book, don't you? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, you're not. Like the people who knew, I've
Yeah.
never heard from again. Like
Sure.
silent, quiet. Um, oh, and there are a lot of like, I'm not going to say I got a lot of haters. I thought I was going to get more haters. I remember the New York Post ran a story about my book, and you got to go into the New York Post comments. That's like the bowels of like, I'm like, if I can read those, I can survive anything. And, a lot of those people were like, oh, too bad, so sad. She made a lot of money. And I get that. And too bad, so sad. I did make a lot of money, and the guys I worked with made twice or three times as much and dealt with half the crap I did. So it's kind of like, yes, the absolute number I made was high, but like, is it really right that just because of my gender, I made a third of what they made and didn't have to deal with the headache and heartache, or as much headache and heartache? I don't want to say they didn't have headache and heartache. Um, yeah, so those were, but I expected more like hateful reviews or that, and I really didn't get those. And I also heard from like, I did hear from guys who were like, am I in the book? And then I did hear from, I'll never forget, I heard from my mentor who I talked to a little bit. Lovely, lovely guy. He left the firm and he wrote me the nicest note when the Bloomberg article came out. He texted me that morning. He's like, I just want to tell you, I am so proud of you for writing what's happening. And I'm sorry I couldn't do more for you at the time. And that meant a lot. So, a lot of really cool messages here and there.
You raised so many questions that, you left now. How many years ago is it that you left Goldman?
Like 9.
Right. Yet these problems are still pervasive in the workplace. And I mean, I think there was a while there where it seemed like things might be getting better. And yet here we are. And some days it feels like we've made virtually no progress. And your book doesn't only address misogyny, it addresses all forms of discrimination that were going on. So
Yeah.
I really would like to get your take not only on sort of the current scenario, but also possible solutions. Um, if what you think can be done to get rid of this absolutely toxic culture that still is so present in so many of our workplaces.
Yeah. So, there was definitely an element of when I was trying to get the book published because it was, I'm getting confused with years now. It was like 2021. So I had been gone 5 years, and a lot of people like, well, you left before me too. Things are better now. And they're really not. In fact, I was just talking to a colleague yesterday about um, I'm working at a university right now, and basically the student wants to go into finance, and basically she was told like the colors of clothing she should wear. Like already, like they were like telling her, you can't wear this, you can't wear that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's still happening. I do think in some ways things aren't quite as overt. So the way I look at it is maybe some of the things that happened to me wouldn't happen today, and I still think that if you are an other at an organization, your careers are still being damaged. But I think it's more like death of a thousand paper cuts as opposed to death by blunt force trauma, right? Like I think there's still all these little things going on. I hear from the women who tell me these things are going on. And so, and, and I do feel like we are getting messaging from like larger systems in the US that are quite minimizing of women. And I mean, we could have a whole podcast on that. So I think there's a lot of messages that we're just getting, period, that kind of are of that vein. And then, of course, I'm a white woman, so I can't even comment on people of color or members of the LGBTQ plus community. And I saw it. And I'm going to report that it was even worse than what I experienced from what I saw. I don't have that lived experience. In terms of like solutions, so I think like I feel like there's kind of two things here. Like, how do we deal with toxic workplaces, and how do people who are in them like survive and thrive? So I think it's kind of a two-part answer. So listen, in terms of toxic workplaces, I think you need two things. I think you need curiosity, and I think you need humility. Curiosity to say, okay, curiosity and humility to say, listen, I think things are going well, but I'm not sure and I want a sanity check. So like just to kind of give you a sense, which I find so fascinating, I can't tell you how many places I've been invited to speak on toxic workplaces and then uninvited.
No.
Yep. For fear of retaliation or retribution from Goldman Sachs, right? I can't tell you how many people in media, people who do podcasts, my message a lot, very like we're talking people with millions and millions of followers, these like new academics who are like the new rock stars now, who like have millions of followers and who talk about workplace culture. Like, people have said to me, "Oh my God, you totally align with their message. They're totally about equal workplaces." And they've said no, because a lot of them speak at the Goldman Sachs leadership conference every year for $100,000 a speech. So what I think is what I first of all think is funny, and I'm kind of going off topic here, but like, people are so tied into the machine. And like, did I make good money at Goldman? Yes. I walked away, like, because my price for freedom is low. Like, I wanted that freedom to open my mouth and speak the truth after kind of shutting up for 20 years. What I find fascinating is there's many people among us who have so much more wealth than I do. And yet are still prostrate at the altar of money. Another media person would love my story, happens to be a neighbor with someone in the C-suite at Goldman. So I feel like there's a lot of people who talk the game and very few people who actually do it. It's a lot easier to walk it. It's a lot easier to talk it than walk it.
Yeah.
So do I feel like, so there's this one company, one of the few companies that had me speak, and he said, a smaller company, he said, listen, he kicked it off by saying, "I don't think we have a problem here, but I'm bringing Jamie in to let you know that I care. And you have to let me know what I'm missing." There's curiosity and humility. I'm still waiting for David Solomon to have me for coffee and talk. That's not going to happen. In fact, they put out a press release saying that they grossly disagree with my characteristics of the firm, blah, 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 blah. All while there was a class action lawsuit by a couple thousand women at Goldman literally saying the same things, and they settled out of court. So, there's just a lot of this. People just only want to see what they want to see. So there's that. So unless you have real curiosity, humility at the upper levels, um, I'm not super confident that anything is going to change at these large behemoth organizations. And that doesn't mean that you can't work there and have a career and take the money and run. So I guess for me, it's like, okay, so now you're a young person, whether you're a woman, a person of color, someone who doesn't match the white, cisgendered, straight man thing of Goldman. So it's like, well, what do you do? Well, number one, if you're really that interested in finance, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat, right? You could work at a smaller firm. I know a lot of women. I've spoken at a lot of women's groups who kind of have their own thing and put out their own shingle. It's kind of a different experience. It's not going to be like working at a big firm. There's that. And then there's also going into it. And so I and like in my coaching business, I work with a lot of women who are like, you know what? Like, go into it with your eyes wide open. I had these like Bryn Mawr coded lenses of like, women can do anything, like, we have an equal spot at the table. And then I was totally crushed. To me, it's like, if you go in knowing exactly what you're going to get, know why you're there, then you can decide. And also, if you decide to go there, to always hold true to the fact that you work for yourself. Like with Goldman, part of my problem was I thought I was Jamie from Goldman.
Yeah.
I was only worthwhile if I was Jamie from Goldman. And so therefore, if I left, I'd be a loser, as if all the things that made me great at Goldman were part of Goldman. And if I left my desk, I literally thought I was going to leave and like never do anything worth anything again. And then when I left, I was like, wait, all those skills I had were my skills. Yes.
You.
Did Goldman help me? Did Goldman get me access to clients? 100%. And I was really good because I was really good. So I think it's like making sure people understand and not get sucked in to the you are what you do. And you work for yourself and you contract yourself to Goldman and you stay there as long as it works for you, knowing that you could go somewhere else. Goldman literally told us, literally, like when people would resign, they would be mocked on the way out.
Mhm.
You can only leave Goldman once. They just made the worst mistake of their careers. They'll never recover from this. So, as a 22, 23-year-old, you're getting this message like, oh my God, I got to stay here. Like, no one will ever hire me again. I'll never have something as good again. And so, I think for the people entering the workforce today to understand that and to fight against it, I think you could stay and have a career. No, is it? Well, I don't know. I mean, listen, and also I want to say too, there are a lot of decent managers at Goldman. Like you could have a great career at Goldman and work for good people. Like that's possible too. And if you happen to be in a business that I was in, well, these are the ways you can kind of survive and thrive and decide whether it's right for you. And if it's not, maybe it's right for you for 5 years and you make a good amount of money and then you leave and you do something else. So I feel like it's just making people feel like they have the option and they're not stuck.
God, you said so many helpful things, I think, and to those who are listening who are either just starting out in careers, whatever those careers may be. But I think that the way those lines get blurred between, our actual identity, who we are, the work that we do, and the entity or whatever. And you alluded to the fact, you just casually mentioned earlier in the podcast that you're doing a master's program. You casually
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah.
that you're working, that you're mentoring. You also just casually mentioned that you're coaching. So I
Yes.
want to talk about what you're doing now.
Yes. So, um, so as I was writing the book, I was like, I'd really love to work with people like me when I was in my 20s, when I was in my 30s, when I was really struggling, when I really didn't think I had um, options. And so I went into some coach training and I got a coaching certificate. So I've been coaching for several years now. And no disrespect to coaches out there. And I feel that, at least in my experience and the experience with a lot of my clients, a lot of the way we move in the world are based on many times beliefs we've had since childhood, since we
Absolutely.
grew up, right? And
Mhm.
so I felt, and again, no disrespect to coaching, but I felt that in order for me to really understand, I needed something a little more substantial than a coaching certificate. So I went back to grad school. And I'm graduating in May with it's called a master's in social service, but it's basically for clinical social work. And my hope is to work as a mental health professional. And now I feel like I have the tools to really talk about beliefs from childhood because, so when I look about my history, so much of the way I made my decisions was based on what I thought about myself, which was really created in childhood. So I just felt I needed kind of more training and more understanding. So right now I'm currently coaching and I'm graduating in May. And then I'm hopefully gonna be part of a practice or some group to kind of work with people. Right now, through the graduate program, I'm interning. So right now I'm working at a counseling center at a local university in New Jersey. Which I really love because I'm dealing with a lot of young men and women who are kind of on the precipice of like launching. And it's like, what do I want to do with my life? And then, of course, it's what do my parents want to do? What do my parents want me
Exactly.
to do with my life? And we
Exactly.
just spent all this money in education, and how much do I have to make to be worth it? And so a lot of it is very reminiscent of, what I went through. And it's kind of helping build insight and understanding of like why we do the things we do to just help inform that, and then maybe challenge some of those beliefs, and then just make choices that are more kind of value centered.
I think it's incredible. I think the work that you're doing is amazing. And I think you're coming from this very unique perspective, somebody who was in it, who left it, who is coming to terms with the whys, not only why did I stay for so long? Why did I accept all this? But why did I get into it in the first place? What were
Mm.
those things, and I think that kids today, young people today get so many uh difficult messages. I think even, compared to what it was like when we were growing up, I think there's this kind of, this the way we idolize money, the way greed has become so normalized, the way we throw around the word billionaire, people's identity being so tied into how much money they make as opposed to the things they do in the world. So I see a lot of value in that work, and I in a lot of ways I think, and I'm sure you feel this way as well, that the book started that healing process for you, but also it got you into this, how can I help others? How can I really help people navigate the world today?
Yeah. And it's funny because this is always what I had wanted to do.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's always what I wanted
No.
to do. Yeah. And when I told my parents that, God loved them. They did the best they could with what they knew. They were like, "No, no, no. You don't go to a school like that to do that. You have to like make this degree worth your while." And so that's why I was pushed to Wall Street to begin with,
Yeah.
because it was like you can't do like that in their mind that was not a money making career, and it's like, well, why are we educating you if you're not going to make money? And so the reason why I went back to school, I don't even know if I told you the story. So I'm actually back at school at Bryn Mawr.
I think I knew you were at Bryn Mawr, which is
And
beautiful.
so I went back to Bryn Mawr for I think it was my 25th college reunion, and my book had been written, and I had gotten to do a book talk, and it was really great. And there was like, it was awesome. And a couple people at the college were like, Jamie, why don't you just go back? Like the school's still here, go back. And so I applied that summer and I started that fall, and I did part-time. So it was 3 years. So I have one more semester left. And, it's funny, like how the world works. Like, in some ways, I feel like I'm better at what I'm doing now because of that life experience, no disrespect to, 25-year-olds who go into the business, but like, I feel like I bring, although I don't have the years of working as a mental health clinician, I do have that life experience, which I think, um, is a bit of a superpower. It's hard in midlife doing a whole new career. And it's kind of been nice to choose a career where I feel like my life experience is valued.
Absolutely. I love
Um,
I love this. I love
yeah, yeah. And I just also want to acknowledge too, like, I feel like what I'm doing is important. And I also recognize that, like, I have a lot of privilege to be able to do it. Meaning, there are a lot of people right now in jobs that are miserable and they are stuck and they can't leave, And so it's like I was lucky that I was able to do that, and I had a supportive spouse and all that stuff. So to me, I feel like if there's ways that I can work with these stuck women to just find either things that they can do instead, or ways to kind of reframe their experiences in their mind, that they can stay in these workplaces without as much taxing their mental health.
yeah. I, I'm just happy that you're finally doing what you've always wanted to do.
Yeah, me too.
But I agree. I think that it is that life experience, that you went through some really, really hard awful stuff. And that's a piece of a big piece of who you are today, and why you're so good at what you're doing now. Gives you this other level of understanding, of empathy, of, again, that extra layer of life experience that really attunes you to the kind of struggles that a lot of people have on the daily, even if it's not anything like Goldman Sachs. A lot of that stuff is very relatable, for a lot of
Yeah.
people, and that the family expectations and societal expectations. So how do you define success now?
Oh, um, I think success is like just being good with what's going on between your ears, right? Like, we talk about real estate. This is the most important real estate right here in the world. I think success is giving yourself the permission. And I also think like a lot of women struggle with this because as caretakers, we either become parents or we help sick parents. And, I feel like a lot of our roles are like relational that we define ourselves on. So it's really, I think, like coming up with your own mission statement, like your own North Star. Like, I really spent a lot of time thinking, okay, well, who am I and what do I want to do in this world? And away from being a spouse or a mother or a daughter or a worker at Goldman, because any role, even if you work at Goldman 20 years, any role is transient, right? Sadly, a lot of us are not daughters forever
Yeah.
because even a lot of clients I have are like, have been stay-at-home parents, and now their last kid has gone to college, and they're like,
What now?
what am I going to do? They feel lost. They feel lost like I felt lost when I went to Goldman. So I think that's part of the challenge, challenging the view that we are what we do. Jamie, yes, Jamie is a mother, and Jamie is a daughter, and Jamie is a spouse, and Jamie is a sister, and Jamie is her aunt, and Jamie is her friend. But Jamie is really X. And so I have my North Star. I have my mission statement. I really do. I have a mission statement.
Oh,
And
good
then
for you.
and then it's like, I want to make sure that success to me is bringing that mission statement to as many roles as I can in my life. And then guess what? If some of those roles go away, I still have my mission statement. And so, that's who I am now. I'm not a student. I mean, yes, I am a student. Yes, I am an intern at this university, but I'm really the CEO of my own business in my mind. And so I think success is really having that North Star and feeling like you're bringing it. Now, listen, some of the roles you're not going to love, right? Especially if you're dealing with like a stage in parenthood or a stage in helping parents and stuff. And if you're not tied to any one role, then if any of those roles are not as fulfilling at one moment, it's okay because you're fulfilled by your mission statement.
It's such a helpful way to think about it, and I'm grateful to you, and I've never thought about it that way, and I think it's a very uh not only I think it's a really good way for us all to approach our lives. And I love the fact that you don't only talk about it specifically professionally, but you bring in all of the roles that all of us have,
Yeah.
and the way and the transience of those roles as well, but having that given, that one truth is such an anchoring idea. And so I'm grateful to you for that, because I want to incorporate that into my life as well, because we do lose a sense of that. I think as mothers, as caretakers, as we lose that sense of like who we are, which is why it was so disorienting for you when you did leave Goldman, because you were like, wait,
Yeah.
wait, wait, who am I without this? Who am I without my kids? Who am I? I'm always Jamie, I know these truths to be, this is who I am. So we're at the end of the podcast, which I can't believe, but this always happens because time flies when I talk to people I really like and I really admire, because I admire what you did with the book. And it was not, I know it wasn't easy. And I think your story is one that deserves to be heard. And so I'm really grateful to you for writing it, but I also admire you for having the strength to do that. So my last question would be, what's next for you, Jamie? We know a little bit about the direction your life has taken, but what else is going on, or what do you see once you do get your degree in May?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I'm really trying hard to like stay in the present moment. I'm always like doing, doing, doing. So like I had a bit of a anxiety rush when I registered for my last semester in classes. I'm like, oh my God, what am I gonna do next? So um I want to I think for me the first goal is to get a kind of consistent practice group to kind of continue working with clients and stuff. I also am really curious, like I got the opportunity since I've been in school to help some professors with research.
Hmm.
And in a lot of ways, I feel like I created like a whole sample from my book because I've heard from like probably over 1,000 women. So, I'm curious about women and roles and jobs and identity. So, kind of like something I'm toying with, like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to like go back to school and like have that be a dissertation on that? And so, again, that's just kind of like is kind of like what's percolating. But I would love to, in some way, harness the stories of all these women and men who've reached out to me and kind of incorporate them in something a little more tangible. The thing I like about social research is I feel like our world right now is driven by sound bites and a lot of information that isn't necessarily valid or true. And one person says it, and then, so there's something I think really um, sturdy kind of about having research to kind of drive points, like just the stuff we're talking about roles and identities. And so I would love to incorporate some like qualitative, quantitative research around that to really kind of understand it better in a more concrete way through research. So that's kind of my like dream after graduating and practicing. So we'll see.
I think, I mean, I want you to do it. I think, I mean, first of all, not because it could become a very important, work. It could become an important book, important research. It feels very timely to me. You're a math numbers person. And, I'm the same way. I love research. I love looking, but even, thinking about how lost we are right now as a society, those
Yeah.
kinds of things are grounding. I mean, could become a really important work that offers a lot of answers to people, gives them guidance, showing through real scientific research.
Yeah.
And I think absolutely. I see a book, go get the PhD, but even if you don't,
Yeah.
just go do the research, write
Well,
the,
that's why. So that's kind of like what I've been thinking of. Like I'm still like
yeah.
formulating my research question, but I think that would be a cool thing. And again, like I'm lucky that I have like the privilege to like continue going to school. But I will take a break
I
after
was
my
gonna say
master's
take
a little bit.
take a
I'll
little
take a little
break.
break.
You deserve a break.
Yes.
But I can't wait to see what you do next. I have so enjoyed meeting you. I just wanted to say again, I think it's so evident to me that this is what you were meant to do. Um,
Oh,
and because, as I said, from that first conversation, you just were such a guiding force in helping me understand a lot of things. And I know that you have been doing and will do the same for many people. So thank you for following your dream, for listening to your
oh,
inner voice, which is what I tell people all the time. Listen to that because it rarely fails you.
it's
It
rarely wrong.
rarely fails you. But we're taught, and we could talk about that next podcast. We'll talk about why we don't listen to our inner voice when, and hopefully the next generation, our daughters, our kids, will listen to those voices
I
more,
mean, women can't even pick a pair of shoes without asking a friend.
right?
It's like, get the shoes. You like the shoes.
Thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to the next time. I really do.
Thank you.
Take care.